Waitress is laughed at for speaking broken English. Then a millionaire turns around and says, Rena's hands trembled as she clutched the menu. She had spent hours memorizing words in English, determined not to stumble again. Yet here she was, surrounded by watchful eyes, some curious, some outright mocking. A burst of laughter from a posh corner table rang out, echoing across the bustling restaurant. Her heart pounded, humiliation rushing to her face like a hot wave. Little did she know that a lone figure seated in the shadows was about to flip her entire world upside down, revealing secrets, shattering prejudices, and proving that not everything in life is as it seems. And it would all begin with a single broken sentence. Rena was born in a small town near Cebu City in the Philippines. The sun rose each day over the ocean in brilliant hues of gold and pink, casting a magical glow across the fishing boats that drifted along the tide. Life was modest but filled with warmth and resilience. Her mother sold homemade empanadas from a small wooden cart. Her father worked the docks whenever he could find day labor, and Rena spent her childhood helping both of them, her petite figure darting back and forth in the thick tropical heat. From an early age, she dreamed of more than her quiet little town had to offer. She would watch foreigners, tourists from Europe, America and beyond, who came to admire the beaches. She paid close attention to how they spoke, how they carried themselves. She listened to the strange rhythms of English with fascination, her lips repeating phrases under her breath. As soon as she learned to read, she spent hours in the local library, devouring every English phrasebook or novel she could find. She believed the language would be her ticket to a bigger world. When Rena was 16, her mother fell ill, and her father's work became sporadic. Medical bills mounted. The household finances weighed upon Rena's young shoulders. She took a job at a nearby cafe. At first, she struggled with English. Locals mostly spoke Bisaya or Tagalog, and her interactions with tourists, though helpful, were not enough to make her proficient overnight. Still, she poured every ounce of effort into practicing speaking to the tourists, reading English dictionaries on her breaks, and listening to Western songs to pick up new words. A year later, an American couple visited the cafe. They were impressed with her polite service, her smiling face, and the evident spark of intelligence in her eyes. They told her about New York, a place that seemed made of dreams to her. The shining skyscrapers, the hustle, the culture. The wife, Harriet White, wrote her number on a napkin, telling Rena she saw tremendous potential in her. Harriet said if Rena ever found her way to the United States, she could reach out. They parted ways, but that piece of paper remained one of Rena's most treasured possessions. When Rena turned 20, she decided to follow her ambition. She scraped together her savings, borrowed money from extended family, and purchased a plane ticket with hope burning in her heart. Upon arriving in the United States, she sought Harriet's help. True to her word, Harriet introduced her to a friend who ran a small diner in Queens, and Rena landed a job as a waitress. At first, it was everything Rena hoped for. The bright lights of the city filled her with wonder. She took the subway daily, reading the signs, carefully absorbing the language. Yet one cold truth soon emerged. Her English was not as smooth as she had dreamt it would be. She could read better than she could speak, and the local accent was intimidating. She noticed customers' impatience. She saw the flash of annoyance on faces whenever she stumbled over a phrase. More painfully, she felt the condescending smirks, especially from those who considered themselves above a newcomer, struggling with the language. Still, Rena persevered. She refused to let a shaky accent overshadow her bright spirit. She diligently studied each night, reciting dialogues in front of the mirror. She planned to move on to bigger and better establishments once she was confident. Despite her difficulties, Rina's determination led her to a more upscale job at Alessandro's, a high-end Italian restaurant near the heart of Manhattan. It was a daring leap. The customers were wealthier, the standards higher, and the stress intense. But the pay was better, and she believed it was a crucial step in achieving success in America. Alessandro's was owned by a charismatic Italian named Alessandro Moretti. He was a short, flamboyant man in his early 50s, with slicked-back hair and an endless supply of gesticulations that danced through the air when he spoke. He liked Rina from the start, her humility, her eagerness, and the unstoppable energy that radiated from within her. He took her under his wing, teaching her about authentic Italian cuisine, wine pairings, and the art of fine dining service. Rina called him Sir Alessandro out of respect, although he insisted she call him simply Alessandro. Within weeks, she began to find her rhythm. Her accent still betrayed her nervousness, but she practiced pronouncing the dishes as perfectly as she could. Guests sometimes smiled indulgently at her efforts, and most were kind enough to appreciate her sincerity. However, not everyone at Alessandro's was supportive. Marjorie was a senior waitress who prided herself on her near-fluent Italian. She had been with Alessandro for over a decade and saw herself as second-in-command on the dining floor. She viewed Rina as an unpolished upstart, someone who dared to invade her territory without the same level of expertise. Marjorie would roll her eyes at Rina's small mistakes, letting out exasperated sighs, and sometimes making sly remarks within earshot of guests. She can barely say gnocchi. Without twisting her tongue, Marjorie would say to other servers, "Honestly, Alessandro is just being charitable." Rina, overhearing these comments, tried not to let them break her spirit. She worked even harder, determined to prove she belonged. It was a chilly November evening. The wind outside Alessandro's was harsh, but inside the restaurant bustled with warmth and lively chatter. The atmosphere was rich with the aroma of fresh pasta sauces, garlic, and the tang of imported cheeses. Rina's shift started promptly at 6, and she was assigned to tables near the rear of the dining area, a less conspicuous corner, usually reserved for quieter, intimate gatherings. Rina thought it was because she was relatively new. She didn't mind. That night, at approximately 7:30 p.m., a large party arrived unexpectedly. They were a group of 6 dressed in sleek designer clothing, men in crisp suits, women in elegant cocktail dresses. They had no reservation, but seemed accustomed to having doors opened for them regardless. Marjorie tried to seat them near the front, an area that boasted the best view of the open kitchen, but they demanded a round booth at the back. That booth, by chance, happened to be one of Rina's tables. She approached them with her usual bright smile, greeting them in a soft, lilting voice. "Good evening. Welcome to Alessandro's. My name is Rina, and I'll be serving you tonight. Can I get you started with some drinks?" One of the men, tall and imposing, with dark, slick hair, barked back. "You got any special cocktails or just the usual? And hurry, we're starving." Rina nodded quickly, swallowing the lump of nerves in her throat. She didn't want to fumble on her opening line. "We have our signature, Negroni Sbagliato, as well as, Peach Bellini," she began. A woman in a red dress leaned forward, eyes cold. "Bellini, you pronounce it weird. Where are you from?" "From the Philippines," Rina answered softly. "Sorry if my accent is a bit off." Their laughter erupted like a sudden thunderclap. They exchanged mocking glances. Another man, wearing a heavily jeweled watch, snorted and made an exaggerated impression of her voice. "Philip Pines, she's sorry about her accent." Rina's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She bowed her head slightly. determined not to retaliate or show anger. She was there to do her job. She carefully took their drink orders, trying hard not to stumble over the complicated wine names. The group continued with subtle jabs, making comments about people who come to the country without learning English. First, Marjorie happened to pass by, and Rena silently prayed she might say something to support her. But Marjorie just tossed her an unsympathetic look and hurried off. Alessandro, tied up at the front with new arrivals, didn't see what was happening. Throughout the evening, the group's behavior escalated. They would call Rena over and ask for more bread, complaining that she was slow. They made snide remarks about her funny manner of speaking. At times, they snapped their fingers at her for attention, behavior unthinkable in a respectable setting. Rena's hands shook each time she brought a dish to the table. She was terrified of making the smallest mistake. Her heart hammered in her chest. Her eyes prickled with tears. She fought them back. All her life, she had faced adversity, and she had sworn never to let insults break her. Still it stung. The tipping point came when she brought out the main courses, steaming plates of spaghetti, alle vongole, fettuccine, alfredo, and veal scallopine. She announced each dish carefully, but as she placed the veal in front of the woman in the red dress, she accidentally mispronounced scallopin in her tense state. The woman's loud, mocking laughter rang out, drawing the attention of several nearby tables. "Oh my God," the woman exclaimed. "Did you hear how she said that? Scallop? Ew, this is just too funny." As Rena stepped back, the group cackled some, leaning in to whisper among themselves. She felt the searing heat of shame rise from her neck to her cheeks, her vision blurring with humiliated tears. In that moment, she nearly dropped the tray of water glasses, still perched in her left hand. Then a voice, clear, firm, and unwavering, cut through the commotion. "I believe the dish is pronounced scallopine, and it's quite delicious. Let's see if we can refrain from ridiculing those who serve us so kindly." Rena looked up. A man from a neighboring table had swiveled around in his chair. He wore a simple button-down shirt and tailored slacks. There was something about his posture, confident, but not ostentatious. His dark, wavy hair was streaked with a hint of silver at the temples. Rena recognized him. He had been quietly observing the entire ordeal, sipping from a single glass of red wine, turning pages of a novel, as though this was his evening ritual. She hadn't interacted with him much, only offered him bread and water when he first arrived. She remembered he had politely declined bread, saying, "I'm waiting for a friend." "Thank you." The tall man with the slick hair from the bullying table scoffed. "Who asked you, buddy?" The stranger set his glass of wine down gently. "No one. But I think this young lady is doing her best under the circumstances. If you're so refined, perhaps you should show some manners. Mocking someone's accent doesn't reflect well on your supposed sophistication." Rena noticed a flash in the eyes of the bullies. The tension around the table sharpened, but the stranger remained perfectly composed. She tried to thank him, but words escaped her, so she only bowed her head in gratitude. A hush settled over the adjacent tables, many pairs of eyes discreetly glancing their way. The group looked flustered, as though no one had ever dared to question them in public. After a moment, they muttered a few curses under their breath and turned away. Deciding it best not to engage further, Rena carefully set the last dish down and whispered a shaky, "Thank you, sir," to the stranger, before retreating to the kitchen. In the kitchen, Rena tried to collect herself. She took several deep breaths, reminding herself that she had survived worse. She felt grateful for the stranger's intervention, but she also worried that the confrontation would lead to trouble. Marjorie stormed in moments later, rolling her eyes dramatically. "What a spectacle! Honestly, Rena can't. You just keep your head down and do your job." Now the customers are complaining about the tension. They were making fun of me, Rena whispered. They were mocking my accent. Marjorie shrugged. Well, you can't blame them for noticing. Look, Alessandro doesn't like drama, so just make sure to smile, deliver their food, and move on. We don't want complaints or bad reviews. Rena bit her lip. She wanted to shout that Marjorie was being cruel, but she didn't dare. She simply nodded, resigning herself to remain calm. When she returned to the dining area, she noticed the stranger rising from his table. He had left enough cash on the bill to cover his glass of wine, generously from the looks of it. Before he stepped away, he caught her eye. Approaching, he gently pressed a business card into her hand. You did well tonight. Keep learning, keep striving, he said in a low voice. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Rena glanced at the business card. It read, Thomas Caldwell, Caldwell Consultancy and Investments. There was a phone number and an address at a prestigious building in Midtown Manhattan. She recognized the address because Harriet White once told her about a building that housed million-dollar businesses near Bryant Park. The name Thomas Caldwell rang a bell, but she couldn't place it immediately. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. She managed, trembling slightly. He nodded, gave a polite smile, and disappeared out the door into the crisp November night. The table of bullies continued their meal, occasionally glancing around, as if uncertain who else might step in if they tried to mock Rena again. Toward the end of the night, they left in a hurry, dropping a paltry tip. Rena exhaled with relief once they were gone. The next day, Rena was off. She stood in front of her tiny studio apartment window in Queens, gazing at Thomas Caldwell's business card. Though the place was cramped, just a small bedroom, attached to a kitchenette, and a narrow bathroom, she kept it spotless. Beside her bed stood a makeshift altar, with pictures of her parents, decorated with a few dried tropical flowers from a Filipino grocery. She always prayed for their health before going to bed, promising that once she made enough money, she would send more back home. She couldn't stop thinking about how Caldwell had come to her defense. She also wondered why that name sounded familiar. With her laptop perched on a small table, she typed in Thomas Caldwell and Caldwell Consultancy and Investments. Immediately, articles and business publications flooded her screen. He was a millionaire, some said multimillionaire or borderline billionaire, renowned for successful real estate ventures, tech startups, and philanthropic endeavors. She even recognized a photograph from a charity gala. Harriet White had once mentioned a generous donor named Caldwell, who contributed to underprivileged communities around the world. Rena stared at the photo of him, dressed in a tuxedo, at a high society event. He exuded an air of quiet confidence, an almost shy smile that belied his enormous success. She never would have guessed the man sipping wine and reading a novel in Alessandro's was such a powerhouse figure. For a few minutes, she wondered, should she call? She had his number. But what would she say? Thank you for defending me. Would that be too forward or even inappropriate? She debated, heart thrumming. In her mind, she heard her mother's gentle encouragement. Kindness should always be acknowledged. Don't let fear keep you silent. Deciding to be bold, she dialed the number on the card. A female voice answered, Caldwell, Consultancy and Investments. How may I direct your call? Rena's mouth went dry. I'd like to speak with Mr. Thomas Caldwell if possible, she replied, stumbling over each word. My name is Rena Almonte. It's, personal. There was a brief pause. One moment, please. Rena almost hung up during the hold, music growing more anxious by the second. Then a baritone voice, Thomas Caldwell speaking. She felt her pulse in her ears. Hello, Mr. Caldwell. This is Rena from Alessandro's last night. The waitress. I just called to say thank you. Your kindness really meant a lot. He was quiet for a moment, perhaps recollecting her Rena. Of course I remember. I'm glad you reached out. How are you doing? His question was simple, but the warmth in his tone steadied her. I'm okay. Still a little shaken. Maybe she admitted, voice trembling. You didn't have to step in, but you did. I just wanted you to know. I appreciate it. He exhaled softly. You're welcome. I can't stand by and watch someone be belittled for trying to learn and earn an honest living. I know how hard it is. Believe it or not, I wasn't always where I am now. And well, sometimes I see my younger self in the eyes of people going through struggles. She took a breath, grateful for his honesty. That means a lot. Thank you again. A quiet moment lingered. Then Caldwell said, Look, I know this might be sudden, but I was thinking about you after I left. You mentioned you're from the Philippines, right? I'm actually on the board of a philanthropic project, aiming to build schools in Southeast Asia. Maybe we could talk about it sometime, if you're interested, over coffee or lunch. Rena's eyes widened. A wealthy businessman, a potential philanthropist wanting to meet her again. It felt surreal. I'd be honored, she stammered, and so they arranged to meet for coffee near his office that Friday afternoon. The cafe Caldwell chose was nestled in a posh district near Bryant Park. Despite the bustle outside, the interior was warmly lit with polished wooden tables and cushioned chairs. Rena arrived early, her nerves thrumming. She wore her best blouse, a simple black skirt, and flats that didn't pinch her toes too much. She practiced polite conversation, in her head praying she wouldn't mispronounce anything. At precisely 2:00, Thomas Caldwell strolled in. He was dressed more casually than she expected, grey sweater-fitted trousers and polished leather shoes. He spotted her immediately and greeted her with a handshake. You came, he said, sounding genuinely pleased. She bobbed her head politely. Yes, thank you for inviting me. They ordered their drinks and Americano for him, a chai latte for Rena, and found a quiet corner table. At first, Rena was shy, but Caldwell's demeanor put her at ease. He asked about her family, her journey to the US, her hopes for the future. She spoke with a mixture of pride and vulnerability, sharing that her ultimate dream was to open a small cafe of her own one day, somewhere that could serve a fusion of Filipino and Western flavors. I want to bring a taste of home to people here, she confided. But it's also about independence. I want to provide for my parents, pay them back for everything they've done for me. Caldwell listened intently, occasionally sipping his Americano. The more she spoke, the more he seemed impressed by her resilience, her discipline, her sincere desire to succeed without stepping on anyone else's toes. Eventually, the conversation shifted to Caldwell's philanthropic endeavors. He explained that he often visited Southeast Asian countries for charity projects. I've met so many hard-working individuals like you. He said, people who simply need a hand up, not a handout. Talent is universal, but opportunity is not. She nodded enthusiastically, understanding that sentiment all too well. What happened at Alessandro's made me think. Caldwell continued. I see a lot of prejudice in this city. Ironically, though, it's supposedly the melting pot. One of my personal missions is to break those barriers, one project at a time. Rena's cheeks warmed with gratitude. She wasn't sure if he was hinting at offering her any direct assistance or just sharing his philosophy. She decided she wouldn't expect anything. His kindness and willingness to meet her was already a gift. They spoke for nearly an hour until Caldwell excused himself for a business meeting. Before parting, he handed her a slip of paper. This is the address of my main office. If you ever need guidance about business or just navigating the city, Come by, I can't guarantee I'll always be in, but I'll do my best to help Rena. Blinked away tears. I will. Thank you, I won't let you down. He smiled gently. I know you won't. Over the next few weeks, Rena continued working at Alessandro's. She noticed that after the confrontation, the group of bullies never returned. Perhaps they were too embarrassed. She also noticed Marjorie watching her with narrowed eyes, especially since Alessandro began complimenting Rena more openly on her service. He praised her for remembering repeat customers' preferences and for her improved pronunciation of Italian dishes. Brava, Rena, Alessandro would say, giving her a warm pat on the back. Your accent is charming, by the way. Don't worry so much about perfection. Meanwhile, Rena mulled over Caldwell's invitation. She worried about seeming too forward or clingy if she dropped by his office. She wanted to prove she was capable on her own. Yet, in the quiet moments of the night, she dreamed about someday having enough capital to start her own cafe. She knew how difficult that path would be without connections or financial backing. Her internal dilemma was settled unexpectedly when Alessandro called her into his office one afternoon. A letter had arrived requesting her presence for a possible business collaboration. At the bottom was Caldwell Consultancy and Investments. The typed letter explained that Caldwell's philanthropic branch was exploring the idea of sponsoring small, immigrant-run businesses. They wanted to hear Rena's story and business concept in more detail. She felt an explosion of excitement and dread. She had only a vague concept of what she wanted her cafe to be. She'd never drafted a proper business plan. She had no clue about the intricacies of permits, leases, or supply chains. Fear gripped her. She was just a waitress with a dream. Alessandro, noticing her anxiety, patted her hand. Take this as an opportunity. Dear, I can help you prepare some notes if you like. Tears welled in Rena's eyes at his generosity. Grazie, Alessandro. Marjorie, however, was far from pleased. She cornered Rena in the staff locker room later. So you're planning on leaving us behind? Are you? Rena shook her head quickly. I haven't decided anything. It's just a meeting. Marjorie scoffed. You don't even speak English properly, and you think you can open your own place. You'll fail. Then you'll crawl back here, begging for scraps. Her words stung, but Rena summoned her courage. Maybe I will fail, she said quietly, but I have to try. Marjorie's lips pressed into a thin line. She flicked her hair over her shoulder and strode out, leaving a trail of cold disdain behind her. One crisp morning, Rena found herself seated in a sleek conference room. High atop a midtown skyscraper, floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of New York's skyline. She clutched a modest folder of notes, the edges dog-eared from her incessant fidgeting. A few minutes later, Caldwell entered. He was accompanied by two associates, an elegant woman in her 40s, named Evelyn Chang, and a bespectacled young man, Henry Johnson, who typed furiously on a laptop. They greeted Rena warmly and offered her water. Caldwell leaned forward, businesslike but gentle. So, Rena, tell us about your vision. Rena cleared her throat, her voice trembling at first. She described her dream of a cozy cafe that featured both Filipino and Italian influences, paying homage to her homeland and her journey in the fine dining world. She mentioned her desire to create a place that felt inclusive to people from all walks of life, where immigrants would feel particularly welcome. She talked about serving homemade empanadas, using her mother's recipe alongside fresh focaccia. She learned to bake at Alessandro's. When she finished, Evelyn and Henry asked thoughtful questions about location, projected costs, target demographics, and marketing strategies. Rena answered to the best of her ability, but she could see the gaps in her plan. She swallowed hard, afraid she might come off as naive. Finally, Caldwell smiled, glancing at Evelyn and Henry, who nodded back. "You have a lot of heart," he said, "and your idea is promising. But you're lacking a detailed plan. No matter how passionate you are, investors need to see the numbers. If you're open to guidance, we can help you develop a proper business plan." Rena exhaled, relieved that they hadn't dismissed her. "Thank you. Yes, please. I'm willing to learn and work hard." "Good," Caldwell replied. "Evelyn will walk you through the next steps. We'll do a preliminary feasibility study. Don't worry, this doesn't lock you into anything. It's just to gauge viability. If things look promising, we might arrange a small loan, or even a direct investment, depending on the structure." Rena felt tears prickle at her eyes. She blinked them away, bowing slightly. "Maraming salamat. Thank you so much." As she left, her heart soared. It was the first concrete step toward her dream. Word spread around Alessandro's that Rena might be receiving backing for her own cafe. Most of the staff congratulated her, though some with envy in their eyes. Marjorie's bitterness escalated, and even the kitchen staff who loved Rena noticed the rising tension. One weekend, Rena was scheduled to cover a high-profile private event in Alessandro's banquet room. She was determined to prove her worth, not only to Alessandro, but also to herself. As she balanced trays of hors d'oeuvres, she overheard Marjorie whispering to a cluster of guests near the bar. "Rena. She's just a flavor-of-the-month project for some bored millionaire," Marjorie said with a smirk. "He'll tire of her, and she'll be back to waiting tables if anyone will hire her. Poor thing can barely string a sentence together." Rena's cheeks reddened with anger. She almost confronted Marjorie, but held back, afraid of causing a scene. She reminded herself that she had more important things to focus on. Still that evening, Marjorie's words looped in Rena's mind like a broken record. She worried that Caldwell might indeed lose interest once the novelty wore off. She worried that her English, though improving, still wasn't good enough for the cutthroat world of business. Her insecurities flared when she discovered Evelyn Chang had set up a roundtable discussion for the feasibility study, inviting potential co-investors. Rena was expected to present her updated plans, this time with cost projections, location analysis, and marketing angles. The meeting was only a week away, and she knew her English had to be clear. Her data convincing desperate, she asked Alessandro for permission to come in late the next day so she could study. He granted it, and she spent hours at the public library poring over small business reference books, practicing her presentation in whispered repetitions. On a day off, while Rena scrolled through her phone, a name popped into her mind. Harriet White, the American tourist who had once helped her get her first diner job in Queens. Though they'd lost touch, Harriet had told Rena to call if she ever needed anything. Now Rena decided it might be time to reach out. She found Harriet on social media and sent a polite message updating her on her life. Harriet responded almost immediately, delighted to hear from her and thrilled about the business opportunity. They arranged a lunch meeting at a cozy bistro in Midtown. When they met, Harriet greeted Rena with a warm hug. "Look at you. It feels like yesterday you were serving me coffee in Cebu." They chatted over salads and fresh bread. Rena explained the situation with Caldwell, the feasibility study, and her insecurities about the upcoming presentation. Harriet listened intently. "I know someone who could help Harriet," said, stirring her iced tea. "Emily Carter is a friend of mine. She's an English language coach who specializes in helping non-native speakers with professional communication. I can introduce you." Gratitude swelled in Rena's chest. "That would be amazing, thank you." Within days, Rena began working with Emily Carter, who patiently coached her on intonation clarity and speech confidence. They drilled business terms, practiced mock presentations, and identified phrases that Rena found challenging. Emily also taught her techniques to manage stage fright, breathing exercises, grounding techniques, visualization. Rena noticed immediate improvements. While her accent remained, her words came out more fluidly, her sentences less hesitant. For the first time, she felt a surge of pride in her ability to communicate. She thought of Marjorie's scathing remarks and used them as fuel to push herself harder. The day of the round table arrived. Rena wore her best professional outfit, an off-white blouse tucked into a neat black skirt with low heels that she had practiced walking in to avoid any clumsy mishaps. She carried a binder filled with printed documents, financial projections, cost estimates, and her carefully laid out concept. When she arrived at Caldwell Consultancy and Investments, Evelyn greeted her in the lobby. They walked to the same conference room as before, but this time 6 other people were seated around the table. Among them were 2 potential angel investors, a marketing specialist and a property lawyer. Thomas Caldwell sat at the head of the table, exuding quiet confidence. Rena's heart pounded, but she remembered Emily Carter's advice. Plant both feet, firmly take a calming breath, and begin with a smile. She launched into her presentation. At first, her voice wavered, but she pushed on. She outlined her cafe's theme, the unique selling points, the startup costs, and potential revenue streams. She cited cultural trends, tapping into the rise of global fusion cuisine. She explained how she envisioned a warm, welcoming space, bridging communities, something she believed New York still needed, despite its abundance of eateries. Occasionally, an investor would ask a question about margins or marketing strategies, and Rena would flip through her binder to reference her notes. She responded with as much detail as possible, her English still accented, but clear enough to convey her points. She drew on examples from Alessandro's, citing what she had learned about customer flow staffing and vendor relationships. 30 minutes later, she finished with a grateful bow of her head. Thank you all for listening. I know I am new to this, but I hope you can see my passion and willingness to learn. A brief silence followed. Then Caldwell gave a thoughtful nod. Well done, Rena. Let's open this up for feedback. One of the angel investors, a kindly older man with spectacles named Robert Shaw, spoke up. Your passion is undeniable, and your concept sounds delightful. My concern is whether you have enough experience to handle the operational complexities. Restaurants are notoriously risky. What's your plan for day-to-day management? Rena took a breath. I plan to hire an experienced manager or chef who can help oversee daily operations, especially in the beginning. But I will be there every day too, learning and taking on more responsibility as I grow. Another investor, a woman named Deborah King, asked about marketing strategies. Rena answered that she planned to leverage social media community events and partnerships with local Filipino organizations. At the end, Evelyn looked around. Any more questions? Silence. She nodded and turned to Caldwell. Thomas. He smiled. I think we have enough to begin drawing up a basic plan of investment. Let's schedule a follow-up in a week. In the meantime, Evelyn will outline possible investment tiers. Robert, Deborah, if you'd like to be part of the next discussion, I'd be happy to have you. They agreed, and the meeting adjourned. Rena exhaled a huge sigh of relief. Her cheeks ached from smiling, but her heart brimmed with hope. Before she left, Caldwell quietly told her, "You did great today. Keep it up." Flushed with excitement, Rena returned to Alessandro's for her evening shift. She was bursting to tell Alessandro about the successful meeting. However, as soon as she walked into the staff locker room, she found chaos. Plates were broken, shards of porcelain glinting on the floor. One of the younger waiters, Miguel, was kneeling to pick up the pieces. "Marjorie's meltdown," he said under his breath. "Alessandro asked her to switch shifts so you could attend your meeting, and she refused." They argued. She stormed in here, threw a tray of plates, screaming something about favoritism. Rena felt a pang of guilt. She didn't want to cause trouble. She headed to the manager's office, where Alessandro was pacing. When he saw Rena, he sighed heavily. "I'm so sorry, Rena," he said, massaging his temples. "Marjorie's not happy about all the attention you're getting. She demanded a pay raise, said she's the senior server, claimed you're overshadowing her." I told her. "That's nonsense." "She threatened to quit," I said. "If she's that unhappy, maybe she should." Rena's eyes widened. "I don't want to cause a rift. She's been here for years, Alessandro." He shook his head firmly. "That's her choice, not yours. I won't let her hold the restaurant hostage. She's had a stable position here for a long time, and I've rewarded her loyalty. But if she can't accept another waitress getting a unique opportunity, then maybe it's time she moves on." Later that night, Rena tried to smooth things over with Marjorie. She found her in the staff lounge, arms folded, glaring at the wall. "I'm sorry if it feels like I'm stepping on your toes," Rena began softly. "You've taught me a lot about customer service, and I respect your experience." Marjorie snorted. "Respect. You waltz in here, messing up orders, embarrassing the restaurant with your broken English, and then some hotshot millionaire starts throwing money at you. Respect don't make me laugh." Rena's stomach churned. "I never asked for any of this. I just wanted to improve my life." "You could do it too, if you don't patronize me," Marjorie hissed. "I know how the world works. Women like you get ahead by playing the victim, reeling in a savior. Meanwhile, I've worked my whole life here, and what do I have to show for it? That's not fair." Rena protested, tears brimming. "You don't know what I've been through." Marjorie shook her head, her eyes glassy. She spat one final remark before storming out. "Enjoy your little moment in the sun, it won't last." The following week, Rena juggled her job and preparations for the next investment meeting. But one evening, she arrived at Alessandro's. To a bombshell, Alessandro had discovered that Marjorie had been telling regular customers that Rena was untrustworthy, that she was planning to abandon Alessandro soon for a better offer. Some customers had expressed concern about service continuity, especially for upcoming private events. Alessandro was livid when confronted. Marjorie blew up, hurling insults at Rena and Alessandro. She threatened to sue for wrongful termination if they fired her. Tension soared until Alessandro, with a trembling voice, told Marjorie to pack her things and leave. The scene was dramatic, with Marjorie shouting, "You'll regret this," as she marched out the door, slamming it behind her. Though Rena felt a sense of relief, guilt gnawed at her. She never wanted Marjorie to lose her job. The incident cast a shadow over what should have been a triumphant phase in Rena's life. Later that week, the feasibility study results came back. Evelyn called Rena with a mix of good and bad news. The good news: the concept was feasible. The projected ROI was promising, and Caldwell's firm was willing to make a moderate investment. The bad news: the timeline and budget were both more extensive than Rena had expected, meaning she would need more capital and more time to break even. She would likely be taking on personal debt as well. Rena's heart pounded. She wondered if she could shoulder that risk. 1,000 worries filled her mind. What if she failed to keep up with payments? What if the cafe floundered? Caldwell, sensing her apprehension, offered to guarantee part of the loan if she committed to an intense mentorship under a successful restaurateur for 6 months. "Knowledge is power," he said, "and I don't want you diving in without a safety net." To her surprise, Caldwell recommended a name, Chef Dominique Rivera, the owner of a Michelin-starred French-Asian fusion restaurant in Brooklyn. He was known to be both brilliant and temperamental, but if anyone could teach her the ropes, it was him. Rena agreed, determined to soak up every lesson. Her official start date at Chef Rivere's restaurant, Le Papillon Oriental, was set for the following Monday. The kitchen at Le Papillon Oriental was a world apart from Alessandro's. It buzzed with intense energy, steel counters gleaming under bright fluorescent lights. Chefs barked orders, pots clanged, and the aroma of exotic spices melded into a heady cloud from day one. Chef Rivera was tough on Rena. He grilled her about flavor profiles, portion sizes, plating aesthetics, and ingredient sourcing. He made her taste dozens of sauces, identify the nuances, and recite potential improvements. He tested her knowledge of wine pairings, which she had only a basic grasp of. If she made a mistake, he would bark, "Not good enough," and thrust the dish back at her to try again. At first, Rena was overwhelmed. She juggled her shifts at Alessandro's, grateful. Alessandro allowed her a reduced schedule and spent the rest of her time in Rivere's kitchen, absorbing as much as she could. She burned her fingers, cut herself once, slicing onions, and sometimes forgot the exact temperature for searing certain fish. Each mistake felt like a blow to her confidence. She collapsed into bed every night, utterly exhausted. But as the weeks passed, she adapted. She learned to be more methodical, to keep calm under pressure. She realized that Chef Rivere's harshness stemmed from perfectionism and passion. Whenever she nailed a dish, he would give her a grunt of approval or a curt nod. Small gestures, but enough to fuel her determination. Meanwhile, Caldwell checked in sporadically, mostly through brief phone calls or messages relayed by Evelyn. Rena appreciated that he gave her space to learn, trusting her commitment. Harriet cheered her on from the sidelines, occasionally sending encouraging texts. Emily Carter met with her once a week to maintain her English practice. After 6 grueling months, Rena emerged from her mentorship, stronger and more confident. Chef Rivere, who rarely offered compliments, told her on her last day, "I see potential in you. A real spark. Don't squander it." He handed her a reference letter, stamped with his signature. Rena felt tears well up. It was a small, precious validation from a master in the culinary world. The next day, Caldwell summoned her to his office. She arrived heart pounding with anticipation. She found him alone in the conference room, sipping black coffee, a folder of documents laid out before him. "How was your time with Rivere?" he asked casually. Rena grinned. "Tough but life-changing. I learned so much." He nodded, handing her a piece of paper. "This is a formal investment offer. My firm is prepared to provide 30% of the capital you need. We have a couple of other investors lined up, including Robert Shaw and Deborah King. Together, we'll cover 50%. You'll need to secure the remaining 50%, either through a bank loan or personal financing. Are you ready to take that step?" Rena stared at the document. Her name typed in bold letters alongside the proposed venture felt surreal. She swallowed. "Yes, yes, I'm ready." Caldwell's face broke into a broad smile. "Then let's make your dream a reality." Finding the right location proved tricky, but eventually they settled on a cozy space in a diverse neighborhood in Queens, not far from where Rena's journey in New York had begun. The building needed renovations, which took several months. Rena oversaw every detail: the color of the walls, the table arrangements, the decor that blended Filipino and Italian elements. She named her cafe Casa Pinoy Bella, a nod to both her heritage and her love for Italian cuisine. As opening day approached, Rena sent out invitations, one to Harriet White, one to Emily Carter, even one to Chef Revere. She didn't forget Alessandro, whose mentorship had been the foundation of her service skills. She also wondered if she should invite Marjorie, but concluded it might only open old wounds. The day finally arrived. The cafe buzzed with anticipation. Rena's parents couldn't be there in person, but they video-called from Cebu to wish her luck. She was wearing a simple but elegant dress, an apron tied around her waist as she greeted the stream of well-wishers. Harriet walked in first, hugging her tight. "I'm so proud of you," she said, wiping a tear. Next came Chef Revere, who gave a small, approving nod. "Don't burn the adobo," he said, half joking. Alessandro arrived with a bouquet of flowers. Brava, Rena. He embraced her. "I can't believe this day is here." Caldwell arrived last, slipping in quietly. He wore his usual understated attire. He took in the warm wooden floors, the chalkboard menu, boasting a Filipino-Italian fusion special, and the smiling faces. Rena rushed to greet him, beaming. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Caldwell." He shook his head. "Thomas, please. And I only opened a door. You walked through it. This success is yours." That evening the cafe hummed with laughter and the clinking of dishes. The menu featured Rena's special empanadas, stuffed with Italian sausage and mozzarella, her homemade adobo-inspired pasta, and classic Filipino halo for dessert. People loved the fusion, praising the flavors. Rena moved from table to table, greeting guests her English confident and laced with an unashamed accent that reflected her heritage. She was no longer self-conscious. She was proud. Just before closing, the cafe door opened again, and Rena looked up to see a familiar figure. Tall, dark hair slicked back, an expensive watch glinting under the lights. It was one of the men from the night she had been ridiculed at Alessandro's. He seemed hesitant, scanning the cheerful interior. Their eyes met. For a moment he froze. A flush of embarrassment colored his cheeks. Rena half expected him to turn around and leave, but to her surprise, he stepped forward, removing his coat. "Table for one?" he asked, voice subdued. Rena's heart hammered. She inhaled deeply. "Of course, sir. Right this way," she said politely, guiding him to a small table near the window. He sat down, drumming his fingers on the table. "Look, I don't know if you remember me," she cut in gently. "I do. You came to Alessandro's with your friends." He lowered his gaze. "Yes, and I was part of that group that didn't treat you well." Rena's chest tightened, but she composed herself. "It's in the past." He grimaced. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. That night, my friends and we were out celebrating, got carried away. But that's no excuse. I felt guilty ever since I saw that article about your cafe on social media. I had to come see for myself." Rena swallowed, unsure how to respond. Slowly she nodded. Apology accepted. "And thank you for coming." He opened the menu. "I'd love to try what you recommend." Rena suggested the empanadas and her signature adobo pasta. He thanked her, avoiding eye contact, clearly humbled. As she walked away to place his order, her mind whirled. She felt a tumult of emotions, relief, a hint of lingering hurt and unexpected compassion. People change, she reminded herself. She'd found her own voice and success. Perhaps it was time to let go of resentment fully. When the man finished his meal, he left a generous tip and a small handwritten note. "Your success is an inspiration. I'm truly sorry for that night. Best wishes." Rena tucked the note in her apron pocket, feeling a curious sense of closure. Over the ensuing weeks, Casa Pinoy Bella gained traction. Word of mouth spread quickly in the neighborhood, and eventually local food bloggers picked up on the unique concept. One day, a short video featuring the cafe's fusion dishes went viral on social media, drawing in customers from across the city. Rina worked tirelessly, sometimes 16-hour days, ensuring every dish met her standards. But she wasn't alone. She had hired a small but dedicated team, a friendly hostess from Vietnam, a sous chef from Italy, and a barista from Colombia. Together they formed a tapestry of cultures, reflecting Rina's original vision of inclusivity. Caldwell remained a silent partner, never imposing but always available for strategic guidance. Harriet frequently dropped by, sampling new desserts. Emily Carter's help meant Rina could confidently handle interviews and public speaking events. Alessandro visited, often proud that one of his former waitresses had made such strides. On a sunny afternoon, Rina stood outside the cafe, watching a new wave of customers filter in. She recalled the timid girl who had left the Philippines, with shaky English, terrified of failure, but determined to dream. She thought of the bullies who once ridiculed her accent, of Marjorie's scorn, and of Caldwell's timely intervention, and she smiled. She realized that adversity had shaped her, each trial forging a stronger spine. She was living proof that an accent was not a weakness, that perseverance could transform obstacles into stepping stones. She understood now fully that success wasn't measured by how perfectly one spoke, but by how fiercely one refused to give up. And so Rina's journey from a timid waitress with broken English to the proud owner of Casa Pinoy Bella reminds us that true grit, a burning dream, and a bit of kindness can break down the most stubborn barriers. She faced mockery, rejection, and endless doubts, only to persevere with determination that carried her through. Along the way, she made allies in the most unexpected places. People who believed in her, who saw her heart and not just her accent. Her story is a testament that we can rise above prejudice, and with faith in our own worth, we can make impossible dreams come true. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster. If you found inspiration or hope in Rina's story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Help us spread this message of resilience and possibility, so that we can all keep building a world of hope, one story at a time.